I filled my gelada in front of 200 people, and I didn't care.
Thank you, mon père. Mon grand-père.
I want you to work on the diction now.
Monsieur Age.
There would be times on the set where I would use the second camera, and I would be on the second camera, and I'd be either shooting things that Steve had told me, or I'd say, hey, here's a great shot, why don't I try this? And he'd say, yeah, great, do that. And we sort of were trading off operations, and you know, he let me shoot second camera. I think he was doing it just to be nice to me.
If you're trying to escape on foot, the desert is 3 weeks in every direction. So please eat something.
That's one of my favorite sequences, and it was born out of a problem, and that was there was no reason for my character to put on that dress.
It's beautiful. I would very much like to see you in it.
Bet you would. So Stephen challenged me to find something. You know, it was sort of like, okay, well, you come up with a good reason why she would put on that dress, and you show it to me, and, you know, we'll see. So it was not difficult at all to enlist Paul, and we went into the tent and just did little improvisations together. And out of that improvisation came this thought that what if there was a sharp knife that was there on that plate, and what if from the moment I put on the dress you see that I'm using my clothes to hide the fact that I'm going to take the knife, and that we created a little story around that. And we also thought it was kind of beautiful to bring maybe the drinking contest back into the story, and that I think I'm going to drink him under the table to be able to escape. And as we're improvising, I just thought, this is it. You know, we found it. This is just so lovely. You know, it has so many wonderful little twists and turns.
We meet again, Fräulein. You Americans, you're all the same. Always overdressing for the wrong occasions.
You remember this coat hanger sequence, the famous thing where Ronnie Lacey looks as though he's producing this instrument of torture. And Ronnie's such a wonderful actor, too. His timing is superb. The audience actually do go, what's he going to do? And then he turns it into this coat hanger.
You see, the scary thing is once it gets long, that's the threat. But then suddenly get to the end, you can look at it just for a moment, to get to the end, and put it together and just instant coat hanger.
It's such a brilliant gag. And it turned out that it was a gag that Stephen had been working up, that he'd used it in 1941 before with Christopher Lee, I think, in The Submarine, playing it. And for some reason or other, it didn't work, and Stephen knew it didn't work, and he was so fond of this gag. It's a nice idea, isn't it, that you keep reworking the gag till you get it right, like Buster Keaton would, you know.
What shall we talk about?
Good.
The Well of Souls, the big figures, the Anubis figures, were jackals of the dead. One of the first things I've thought of really was opening the well and seeing the head of one of these figures, which seemed to me to be, they lent themselves to that, all sort of looking up, you know, ready to sort of gobble you up. But everything in there was really entirely Egyptian, apart from little engravings of 3PO on the wall, one or two other little niceties that Stephen had suggested.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
I cannot tell you how many times I get asked to do asps. Very dangerous. You go first.
Asps. Very dangerous. You go first.
I grew up in Africa, and part of my childhood fears and phobias are very linked with snakes. I was not wildly happy about snakes.
I'll be right down to talk to you about the mechanical snakes. We've got to work out something else. I'll be right down.
I found that I was able to clear up a lot of my phobias on these movies. For example, I never really liked snakes, so I had to find a reptile expert in Europe. And I guess once that I learned that the snakes that we were working with were non-poisonous, it was a little easier to just pick them up. So we brought in a bunch of these snakes and we put them in the shot, and I think we had about 1,000 snakes, which I assumed was plenty.
I got to have live snakes, and there's not enough. The set's too big for the amount of snakes that we have. We had 2,000 to 3,000 snakes, and they hardly covered. I couldn't get a wide shot. I couldn't go back because I would see that there were no snakes on the sides. So that's when I said to Robert Watts or to Frank Marshall, we have to get more snakes. You know what we really need? We need about 7,000 snakes in addition to the 2,000 we have here to make it work.
He said, we don't have enough snakes. Can you get them? I said, absolutely, Stephen. And I rushed away because our mantra then was, we can do whatever you want. So we looked all over Europe, and we got 3 or 4 other snake breeders to deliver boxes and boxes of glass snakes.
I just remember this image of these gnarly snakes being regurgitated out of trash cans and then untangled and spread out by crew members all over the floor of this set. And I'm not afraid of snakes, but that made me nauseous. That made me want to puke. Just seeing the Medusa tangles being, just spread around. And some of them were pythons, which they're not poisonous, but man, when they bite, they don't let go. And at one point, David Tomlin got bit by a python. And David just stood there with the python not letting go, and some blood was coming down David's hand. David just stared at it and said, hey, somebody grab the tail and give it a snap. It'll make the head let go. I don't know how David knew this. Somebody grabbed the tail of that python, went like this, the shock wave went up to the head, and the head let go. The snake was fine. David got some medical attention, then he was fine. Okay, watch your hand. He's about to bite you right there. He's about to bite you. Yeah. What his name? He's good for a close-up. He's good for a close-up. One more right here. He's got coiled. No, I want the biters out right now. Two biters. Him and him.
There were a lot of snakes. Actually, I wasn't there when they shot the snakes. And that's one of the reasons why Stephen directed the movie and I didn't direct the movie, because I didn't want to sit on a soundstage with 1,000 snakes for a week trying to get that sequence shot. I'm just too lazy a guy for that.
I want one person whose job it is only to keep the pythons away from endangering the actors.
Let's reconsider this whole thing.
I personally don't have any fear of snakes, or for that matter, bugs or rats, happily. The snake sequence had a lot of people very apprehensive, but it didn't bother me at all, really.
Just get ready to shoot right away.
But the day that the cobras arrived, everything changed. Everybody was very serious about the cobras being there. We had anti-venom serum, we had a lot of protection for the handlers, and even the actors were very respectful of these snakes because they were deadly.
In the famous shot of me facing the cobra, you can barely see a reflection on the sheet of glass that was between myself and the cobra. They took some elaborate precautions on that occasion.
I told you it would be all right!
And at one point, it hooded and whipped its head off to the side and literally threw venom all over the glass. So that was something that caused everybody to sit up and take notice and recognize that this was not something to play around with.
I do remember the snakes were supposed to recoil from fire, but in fact they got close to fire to get warmed up. You don't like fire? You do like fire. You love fire. In the script, you're supposed to hate fire. Why do you like fire? You're ruining my movie.
Harrison's in these big boots, and he's got these long, hefty pants on, and he's got the whip, and he's I'm in this little white dress with nothing on my arms and nothing on my legs, and of course I have to lose a shoe, and I'm surrounded by the snakes, and it's just, there was a part of me that I just thought, I want the big heavy boots, I want the big heavy shoes, and I didn't want to feel as exposed as I felt in those clothes often, which of course is part of the fun of the whole thing.
Frozen a second, and then a shriek, and back to Harrison's back. Let's see that. All right, that's just getting up. Good, that's funny. That's the idea. Karen was really fun to work with because, when I first met Karen, I knew that she was a serious actress, but she's never gone to the school of Indiana Jones. So she took a crash course on a different kind of acting. But once she got into it, she was absolutely terrific. Herself came up with even worse things for me to do to her.
Maybe by that time I could start batting him or something.
Oh, yeah, I know what we should do. When we get to the next skeleton, that's a good idea.
dragging
That's a
himself
great
up.
idea. Wait a second. That's terrific. So great, my earphone broke in half. That's how good the idea was.
That sequence was much more horrible than the snakes for me because it was physically very demanding. I was alone in the catacombs, and we did a whole sequence of me running through the catacombs and various things happening. But I found that much more difficult than the snakes. I'll take the snakes any day of the week.
And action. No, okay, it's gotta be. Now, but you saw what Karen did was right. What you did was absolutely right. That's the timing of the shot.
But I was so happy when that sequence was completed.
In terms of the flying wing, when I first read the script, I had no idea of what that really meant. So I researched that and discovered that, in fact, the American Air Force had developed a flying wing during World War II that wasn't very successful, but nevertheless, the thing actually existed, and we set about sort of designing the wing for the film.
I remember that was an interesting scene because I began storyboarding it, and I had about 15 storyboards. But then I threw out the storyboards, and I began just to choreograph the fight. And I basically made that scene up as we shot it. One punch at a time, one duck at a time, one almost going into the prop and then backing up. That scene was only meant to be a couple of punches and turned out to be something like 60 or 70 different shots. And that was so much fun to work on because we just were making it up every single moment.
Spend about 6 seconds looking for it and come up with it. Okay. And click it when you come back up. Right. Just follow the fight without pointing. Okay.
On the morning that we were starting the sequence, all of the stuntmen were sick, and they were at the hotel, and we didn't have anybody to play the flying wing pilot who had to get hit over the head with the chocks, which was a really tough stunt. So Steven said, well, Frank, put on the outfit, get in the cockpit. And I thought, oh, this will be fun. Little did I know that it was 3 days in a jumpsuit in a cockpit that was about 140 degrees. Maybe the stuntmen were sick on purpose that day.
At a certain point, I slipped and fell, and the wheels rode up onto my knee, which resulted in me tearing the arterial cruciate ligament in my left leg in the middle of Tunisia. So rather than submit to any local medical care, we just wrapped it up and put ice on it and carried on.
Holy smoke, my friends! I'm so pleased you're not dead! Indy, we have no time. If you still want the Ark, it has been loaded onto a truck for Cairo.
Truck? What truck?
Stand by, this is picture. Ready, sir? Right. Okay, turn it on and roll cameras.
I had never given up in my life. Of course, I hadn't made that many movies yet, but I had never given up that much second unit before. And I gave the entire truck chase over to Mickey Moore, who I trusted completely. And I had all the storyboards, and he pretty much did copy the storyboards. But he would also throw in 1 or 2 bonus shots, which really gave flavor, even more energy to that sequence.
Now we start to tighten up here where we see the truck now starting to catch up again to the lead car. Reaction, I thought this wasn't in it, but we need it to keep them alive.
Gotta have that.
They're in the front.
Did you add these 2 shots?
Yeah. Overall, the whole chase was probably 6 to 8 weeks. And then, of course, Steven went back and filled in all the close shots with Harrison. I was able to make 1 shot for Steven with actually Harrison being dragged.
Dragging behind a car. Dragging behind a car.
All right, roll cameras.
I'm sure it's not dangerous. See, if it was dangerous, they would have waited till we got more of the movie done.
Put your head up just a little if you can. That's it. Hold it. That's good. Beautiful. Nothing wrong with that. Stuff.
I would want to see Mickey's dailies before I would see my own dailies. Because I would want to see, well, how's the second unit doing with the truck chase? And, then remember, dailies have to go to England and then come back to Tunisia. So it was a couple days before I would see any of the dailies from Mickey's shoot.
And I can't think of through the whole chase where Steven ever phoned and said, Mickey, I don't like so-and-so. Why don't you do it over? that was very encouraging to me and the unit that I had behind me. I had a wonderful unit. I have one belief as a second unit director: the better the help you have around you,